Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Coming up here pretty shortly, we've got the Season 5 Reloaded updates. And with it, as with any major, seasonal launch or mid-season update, we are going to see a significant weapon tuning update as well. That's going to change around some of the main meta weapons. It's going to buff some things. It's going to nerf some things. It's also going to add in some new weapons into the arsenal as well. And being that this is the Season 5 Reloaded update, it is ultimately going to be one of, if not the final major meta update that we see for Warzone 1. It's possible that, in the coming weeks leading up to November 16th when Warzone 2 launches, that we see maybe some fine tuning here and there, some slight buffs here, some slight nerfs there, but ultimately this is going to be one of the final major content and weapon change updates that we see for Warzone 1. So naturally, I wanted to go through and break down what to expect with this next and with this final meta tuning update, because there's a few things that I think are very apparent in the Warzone meta right now. Now, of course, this list, no stranger if you are a familiar viewer here on the channel, and honestly, where the meta stands, it's pretty solid. I mean, yes, we have our pretty defined top meta weapons. Things like the UGM are absolutely insane. The Grau is still feeling very strong. The PPSH and the Arma are super strong right now as well. The Volk, the Cooper, great choices as well. The competitive category, though, you could get away with using any of these weapons and ultimately they would do very, very well, right? Maybe not be the absolute best of the best, but if you're a decent player and you know what you're doing with these, you could certainly beat out some of these top meta options. And in the viable category as well, while these might not be the craziest guns in the world, if you wanted to mess around, by the way, we got to move the Garanko up to at least the competitive category. What are we doing here? Anyways, if you looked at the viable category here, you could certainly get away with using these and you could do well with these as well. So our meta is pretty solid for having, 140, 150 plus weapons in the game right now, but there are a few things that need to be changed, right? So we are here on Warzone Ranked, and this site, because we can see which weapons are being picked the most, which weapons have the highest KD, which weapons people are winning the most with, it's one of the most useful websites for figuring out what is likely going to be adjusted based off of what Raven has said in the past about how they make the majority of their weapon adjustments. Previously, they've come out and said, yes, obviously, if a weapon is super broken, for instance, like the DMR back in the day that could two-shot across all of Verdansk, clearly it's not balanced. It has to get a hard nerf to balance it out. Things like the FAMAS underbarrel shotgun or the snake shots, like obviously things like that need nerfed. But then you look at other options in the game that feel very strong, but are they super broken, super overpowered? Maybe not, but are they getting picked a ton? Are players doing really, really well with them? Are they also winning a ton with them? Once that reaches a certain point, Raven has said, yes, this is something we take into consideration, and that's when we'll make the necessary adjustments. And we actually see a very clear pattern here. The first and most obvious change I see coming with this next meta update is a nerf to the UGM8. You can see it's currently our third most picked weapon in the game. It's also the #1 most picked ranged weapon in the game. Obviously, the PPSH and the Armaguerra are above it, but they're close range weapons only. The UGM for mid to long range is insane. We've broken down the TTK charts many times on the channel in the past, and while you have things like the Grau, the Automaton, the Cooper, the Kilo, the STG that are good for long range, the UGM kills so much faster than all of them, it's not even a close comparison. Now, yes, it's slower, it's heavier, the reload lasts 9,000 years, but its damage output is just absurd. So I fully expect to see some changes to the UGM with the Season 5 Reloaded update, maybe even sooner, honestly, that end up bringing it more in line with some of the other long-range choices, most likely in the form of either another damage drop-off or some kind of damage reduction so that it's not so strong over range. Maybe they just add a ton of recoil to it as well, because right now it's pretty low recoil. And again, the stats here back it up. It's the third most picked. It actually has the highest KD in the entire game, which says a lot. Usually it's awkward weapons that have high KDs, like the Garanko, not something everyone can use. A lot of players do prefer the 3 lines still. And then also its win rate is tied for the highest with the Garanko. So it literally has every box checked for this weapon needs a nerf criteria, right? So I fully expect to see some changes to the UGM8. Now, right alongside that, the Arma and the PPSH. These are our clear #1 and #2 SMGs. Now, which one you think is the best, that's a bit more subjective. I love the PPSH, but I also love the Arma at times too, and I kind of go back and forth. Regardless, I feel like there is a significant gap between these two weapons and, say, the MP40, the Blixen, the Marco, and that's again shown on this graph. You can see the MP40's up here, but it's not nearly as high picked as these. Same deal with the Blixen, it's actually right there too. And then we have some other SMGs further down. The Marco, the MAC-10 is surprisingly up there, but these two are a little bit too dominant, so I'd probably expect some changes to those. And by the way, most cases, some players would say, you know, why don't we just buff the MP40? Why don't we buff the Blixen to be on the equivalent level of the PPSH and the Arma? That's where we get back into the territory of every gun insta-deleting and the TTK just being too fast. And that's why most of the time we'll end up seeing nerfs to these guns rather than buffs to the others. Because like honestly, the MP40 and the Blixen and whatnot, they feel super well balanced right now, whereas you can probably say the PPSH and the Arma are a little bit too consistent if you know what you're doing with them. So I'd also expect some nerfs to those, maybe some slight TTK changes to the newly buffed Nambu rounds on the PPSH, or maybe some changes to how those barrels function, because quite literally every single barrel on the PPSH is viable for some kind of build. So maybe that's a little bit too overbearing, and that's why it's so good. Arma just is a little bit too easy to use, so I wouldn't be surprised if they mess with the recoil or something there, just to bring that more in line and more consistent in line with some of the other SMGs that we've got. Now, you'll also notice there is a surprising amount of MW and Cold War weapons that are in the competitive and meta categories right now. The Grau is probably the #1 standout, and this really got me thinking, because you'll remember a few updates back, they ended up buffing the M13 and the Kilo, and right away everyone jumped on board. Oh, the Kilo is meta again. Oh, the M13's meta now. And within a week, they ended up nerfing them again to bring them more in line with the other guns, because they saw, oh, we've got MW guns being way too strong. Obviously, our focus is Vanguard. We can't have them being this dominant, even though they weren't actually all that great. Now, I won't lie. The Grau got buffed. I was over the moon happy because it's my all-time favorite gun, but when it got buffed, everyone started using it. Clearly, it's the most picked non-Vanguard gun in the game. I expected it to get the Kilo treatment and be really good for like 3 days and then get nerfed because they didn't want it to be that hyped because it's not a Vanguard gun, but it hasn't changed. So I'm starting to wonder if now, because we are approaching the end of Warzone here, at least Warzone 1, you know, if Warzone 2 stays the way it is, maybe more players will be on Warzone 1 than we thought. But with the, content cycle and the life cycle of Warzone 1 winding down, perhaps they're more interested now in finally letting some Cold War and some MW guns thrive a little bit more. So leaving things like the Grau, the Kilo, the HDR, the M13, the M4 up there to be a little bit more competitive, and maybe even buffing some of the lesser used MW and Cold War guns. The Krig and the AK's recoil could be adjusted a little bit to make them easier to use. You could adjust things like, I would love to see some changes to the MW and Cold War subs, because the SMG category is just so Vanguard dominant, it's boring. Whereas rifles, it's honestly very competitive. Like, you could get away with using a lot of Vanguard, Cold War, and Modern Warfare guns, whereas it's not necessarily the case with some of the other categories. So we could potentially see some nice adjustments to Cold War and MW guns to make them more competitive in general. And then lastly, this one's not really a surprise, but obviously we've got 2 new weapons debuting with the mid-season update: the BP50, which is basically the FN2000 or the F2000, and then the NF57. These are 2 rifles. They're mid-season guns. You can buy a bundle for them right away when they release. There's also a free challenge to unlock them. The mid-season weapons almost always seem like they are meta or super competitive at the very least, just because it promotes bundle sales, it promotes players getting on multiplayer and unlocking the guns. So I fully expect these to be in the meta conversation for sure, at the very least, if not some of the top weapons when they initially end up dropping. So just a couple of basic overview changes of what I expect to change with this meta. Usually, at least based off of the past few seasons, I'm pretty accurate with these, and I'm glad that I can give you guys insights like this and they actually hold up. So of course, once the full patch notes and everything end up releasing for Season 5 Reloaded, we are going to break those down ASAP right away when they drop, so we'll have all the information out for you guys right away. If you want to stay up to date with that and everything else going on in COD, the new updates, MW2, Warzone 2, all that stuff, be sure to subscribe with those noties turned on. And if you guys enjoyed this video, let me know by dropping a like on it. It would be seriously appreciated. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I will catch you guys later. Peace out.